What's one of the biggest misconceptions about your cousin Tupac Shakur that you've heard from the media or people who've never met him?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of misconceptions about, particularly from people who never met him, because most of the people who, not most, but some of the people who I see talking about Tupac, by the way, let me say this, Pac is ubiquitous, like he's everywhere at the same time. He's all over social media, he's all over the news, he's on every social media platform all day, every day. And I'm noticing more and more people appearing on these podcasts talking about Tupac and their experiences with him. And, I'm not doubting that they're telling the truth, but I am hearing a lot of misconceptions. By the way, for instance, shout out to the person I'm about to mention, Fat Joe. Shout out to Fat Joe. Got a lot of respect for Fat Joe. He's from the Bronx. I'm from the Bronx. I know what hood he's from. I know some of his OGs from his projects. I think he's from McKinley or Forest Projects. McKinley and Forest are right across the street. I know some of the people from there, his OG. So shout out to Joe. I don't have nothing against him. I like him as an artist. I think he's dope, he's thorough. But I have to disagree with something that he's been saying on podcasts about Pac calling him about some Puerto Ricans putting pressure on him in Clinton. Now, the reason why I'm questioning that, I'm not saying Joe is lying, I'm just questioning it. The reason why I'm questioning that is because I know how the Puerto Ricans roll in prison, right? I know how they roll. And I know Joe is strong in New York with Puerto Ricans. I've been around Joe several times, and he got Puerto Ricans around him that'll hurt something, for real, right? So I know he got strength with Puerto Ricans, his people. But as far as Tupac being in prison and having to call Joe to keep the Puerto Ricans off his back because they think that he got beef with Joe in the street or some, I don't know about that. Mind you, I was going to visit Pac every month. If Pac was having problems with anybody in prison, I would have been the first to know about it. Not only would I have been the first to know about it, Watani would, you gotta know, the people who are in prisons, who run the prisons, there's a lot of Puerto Ricans who do. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of people who run the prisons in the New York State penal system are people that we know. They people that love us. They family members, man. They people, you get where I'm coming from, Del Rey? Tupac wasn't in a prison where people was going to walk all over him. That wasn't going to be the situation. He was in prison with people who were strong.
Absolutely.
Tupac didn't want our people protecting him. He refused when he first got into Clinton. There were people already with care packages for him. Like strong people, like legendary. Like I'm talking about legend. They all in the newspapers, dude. Legendary. That is telling Pac, if you got problems, let me know. I'm gonna make sure that the CEOs know, blah blah blah, and this and that. And Pac telling them, nah, that's all right. I don't need none of you guys to help me with nothing. I'm good. I'm gonna ride this on my own. And then the officers, knowing Pac's connection with some of the strongest people in Clinton, taking him out of population and putting him in segregation so that he don't incite anything in population. So that there's no chance of anybody trying to take advantage of this guy who is being watched by some of the strongest men in prison. Does that make sense to you? That some Puerto Ricans is going to put pressure on him so that Pac can call Joe, of all people, to tell his people, does that make sense?
Well, like I said, everybody has their story. That's why I'm asking you this question and the misconceptions and things that you've heard in regards to that. And I think that you would know more about that than anything, having had your experience in dealing and being in Rikers and all of those things and knowing what you're explaining right now. I think that's something that you can answer better than I
Especially,
probably ever could.
yeah, especially in Clinton. Like I was in Clinton. I used to work on Clinton Farm. So I know how that, and like I said, he's right about the Puerto Rican. They got strength in those jails and they buck wild. But when it applies to them putting pressure on Tupac, I don't see that. I see that being far-fetched. I don't see that being actually accurate. Now, he may have embellished a little bit in telling that story, but I do not see Tupac being pressured enough to where he has to call Fat Joe to clear some shit up for him. Tupac could have called, look, dude, I don't want to go and get into names and shit like that, but he could have called any one of the people that I'm thinking about that could have put a stop to whatever that was going on with him, if it was going on. As I said, I used to go visit him every month, and you know what Tupac's problem was? His problems was with the fucking officers. Not giving him his packages, and keeping his cigarettes, and he can't get showers but once a day. He can't go out to rec. Not other inmates. Not other inmates.
And that was confirmed. That was actually confirmed, like by a letter that he had wrote in regards to having the problem with the guards and so on.
Yeah, he didn't have no problems with no damn inmates. And look.
So that brings me to another question, because I think this is very important. Once again, you were one of the people there. There's been rumors that Tupac was assaulted in prison. You know what I mean when I say assaulted,
yeah,
and not wanting to use that other word. There's rumors that something allegedly happened to him. Billy, you being one of the people who visited him often, stayed overnight in hotels so that you could visit him, being the best man at his wedding. Speak to that and put that rumor to rest, please.
Yeah, I'll speak to it because you're asking me to. But my little homie Edie already did a podcast about that. He did a show on YouTube about that, answering or addressing that misconception. And I'm just gonna echo what my little man said. Like, yo, look, let me put it this way. No, that's not true. That's a lie. That's a flat out lie that Tupac will get violated in jail. That's a flat out lie. But it's even more deeper than that. And I'm getting a little bit into it. Number one, if you are a stand-up guy, if you are a man of substance, if you are a man that's not cowardly, if you are a man that do not create confusion, do not backbite or with people like that in jail, you're not gonna have no problems with your manhood. You're not gonna have no problems with other inmates trying to dig in you. That's not gonna happen. Most of the time in New York State, I can't speak to prisons in California or anywhere else because I haven't been to prisons in those places. But in New York State, if you're a man that avoids the confusion, that avoids all the nonsense that sissies do, you're not gonna have problems with other men in jail. Tupac was a man that was not into that type of confusion. He was not into that lifestyle. So just like any other man in prison, he's not gonna have that problem. But for someone to start a misconception or tell a straight lie about either hearing about Tupac being violated in jail or spreading that lie, they don't understand the reality of New York City prisons. It just don't happen that way. It don't happen that way. I'm gonna tell a quick story. I'm gonna give you an example. When I was up north, when I was in prison, there was a guy that I was in prison with that was a stick-up kid. He was Puerto Rican. He was ruthless, ruthless. Nobody bothered him. Nobody with him. He was ruthless. He was good with his hands. He always kept the Puerto Ricans in prison. They always keep knives. They're known for they're stick you quick. They got knives that come from you don't even know where they get them from, but I'm telling you, they got knives everywhere. He would stick you quick. He put fear in a lot of niggas' hearts in prison. This dude ended up falling in love with a punk, so much to the extent that he and the punk would walk the yard together holding hands, that they would wear matching outfits. You know what I'm saying? Nobody forced him to do that. He did that willingly. And that drives to my point that it will either have to be asking for someone to dig you out, or you will have to be such a weak, nothing type of guy that people feel like you should be violated. None of us are built that way. We're not built that way. Nobody in my family is built like that. Nobody I know is built like that, except for the guy I just told you the story about.